In this video, we're going to focus on converting between units of measure in order to solve math problems. So first of all, what are units of measure? Units are used to describe the amount of distance, capacity, weight, time, etc. And here are some examples. So for distance, depending on the amount that we're measuring, we might use a variety of different units like millimeters, inches, feet, meters, yards, miles for really long distances. Similar for capacity, teaspoon, cup, liter, quart, gallon, cubic foot. For weight, we have a number of different measurements like grams, ounces, pounds, kilograms, and tons, all used to measure the same kind of thing, but for different amounts. And similar for time, we have seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, and years. So using a unit conversion reference can help you convert between units for a similar kind of measurement. It's important to note that the unit with the smaller number in front of it is the larger unit. Let me make an example from this unit conversion reference. This is just an example reference. There's all kinds of these available depending on what you're converting between. But let's just take a look at one that's pretty familiar. We all know that a foot is larger than an inch. Notice that it's 1 foot equals 12 inches. So the unit with the smaller number in front of it, in this case, 1 is in front of feet, is the larger unit. Inches has the bigger number, that's the smaller unit. The same thing applies to pounds. 1 pound equals 16 ounces. Ounces are smaller than pounds. So you'll understand why I'm focusing on this when we get to the rules of unit conversion. And that starts right here. Do we multiply or divide? When you're doing a unit conversion, you're either going to multiply by a number or you're going to divide by a number. But you need to decide which, and that's really important. So in this case, I have this example where we have 1 yard, and 1 yard contains 3 feet. It's very clear that feet is the smaller unit, yard is the bigger unit. How do we make use of that information? If we're converting to a smaller unit, in this case, from yards to feet, we're going to multiply. We are going to have more feet than we had yards. For example, how many feet are in 15 yards? Look up the conversion factor. 1 yard equals 3 feet. This tells us that yards are the bigger unit. Feet are the smaller unit. We're converting to the smaller unit. So we should multiply. Multiply by 3, 15 times 3, there will be 45 feet in 15 yards. So let's look at a different example. 1 gallon, 4 quarts. Quarts are the smaller unit. There are 4 of them in 1 gallon. That's what these lines are meant to indicate. Gallon is the bigger unit, quart is the smaller unit. When we're converting from quarts to gallons, we're going to a bigger unit. We need to divide. There will be smaller. There will be fewer of that bigger unit. So we get a smaller number by dividing. For example, how many gallons are there in 15 quarts? Look up the conversion factor. 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. We're converting to a bigger unit, so we should divide. Divide by 4. 15 divided by 4 equals 3.75 gallons. Use your intuition and instinct on these problems because you probably have a very good sense for whether you should end up with a smaller number or a larger number. If you should end up with a larger number, multiply. If you should end up with a smaller number, divide. Good rule of thumb. So why do we need to convert in order to get the same units? Word problems will sometimes provide measurements in different units. I'll show you an example in a moment. The problem is that you can't do math with different units. For example, we can't divide inches by yards. Let's say we're doing a math problem and we've been given one dimension in inches and another dimension in yards. We can't divide those. We can't add them. We can't multiply them. We can't do any math with these two different units. So we need to pick one of them and convert everything to that unit. Let's say we decide we're going to work in inches, then we need to convert yards to inches. If we want to work in yards, we need to convert inches to yards. It's usually best to pick the units that are part of the answer. For example, if the question asks for a number of square feet, then convert all of the units that you have to feet, because then you're going to be able to quickly work out the math and find the correct answer in feet. Let's go through 3 examples here. You bought 3 2-pound bags of coffee at Costco. How many kilograms of coffee did you get? We've been given the conversion factor here. We look at the conversion factor and we note that the smaller number is in front of kilograms. That means that this is the bigger unit, and this is the smaller unit, pounds. Sometimes with converting metric, it can be difficult to figure out which is the larger and which is the smaller, but the conversion factor gives you that information. So we're converting 2 kilograms, which is the bigger unit. That means we need to divide. We will have fewer of that bigger unit. We will have fewer kilograms than pounds. So that tells us that we need to divide. First of all, though, we should figure out how many pounds we bought at Costco. We bought 3 times 2 pounds each. We bought 6 pounds of coffee. Now we can convert that total amount of coffee that we bought to kilograms. 6 divided by 2.2, or 6 over 2.2, whichever way you prefer, should give you an answer of about 2.7 kilograms. And we get a smaller number, which makes sense because kilograms are larger than pounds. Okay, let's look at our next example, which will involve another step. You run a company out of your home and you make vinyl signs from 400-inch long rolls. So you buy these new rolls and they contain a total of 400 inches before you get started. Each sign uses 1 yard from the roll. You just made 10 signs from a new roll. How many inches are left on the roll? So a little bit like the coffee question, the first thing that we might want to do is to figure out how many yards did we use? Well, we used 1 yard and we made 10 signs. So we used 10 yards off of this roll. But as we talked before, we can't do math with yards and inches. So we'd like to subtract 10 yards from this 400-inch roll, but we can only do that if we change this to inches first. So let's take a look at our unit conversion. 1 yard equals 36 inches. This tells us that yards is the bigger unit. We are converting to the smaller unit. We're going from yards to inches. We're going to end up with a lot more inches. That means we should multiply. So 10 yards times 36 inches per yard. We used a total of 360 inches. Now we have one more step to go, because the question asked us is how many inches are left on the roll. We want to subtract the 360 from 400. That gives us 40 inches are left. And here's our answer, C, 40 inches. So as I said, that problem involved an additional step where we needed to subtract at the end in order to figure out what was left on the roll. Let's look at one more example. A raised bed garden is 18 inches wide by 10 feet long. Let me make a little diagram here. So we have kind of a long, narrow, raised bed garden, and this is 18 inches, and this is 10 feet. Now, we know that the formula for the area of a rectangle is pretty simple. It's width times length, but we can't multiply inches times feet. That will give us a meaningless number. We also want to pay attention to what is the area of this garden in square feet. That tells us we should be operating in feet. We look at our two dimensions and we note that this is in inches. We want to convert that 18 inches to feet first. So 18 inches is going to be how many feet? We are converting to a bigger unit. We will have smaller number of inches because we're converting to a bigger unit. We should divide. So 18 divided by 12 gives us 1.5 feet. Now we can actually think about erasing this and saying, okay, now we've kind of fixed this problem. It's 1.5 feet times 10 feet. Now we can do the area calculation. Our width is 1.5. Our length is 10. We multiply those two together and we get a total of 15 square feet. That's the answer that we were looking for, but we can only get that answer by aligning everything in feet first. Answer B over here. All right, that was a quick review of using unit conversion to help you out with math problems, especially word problems. Now it's time for some practice on your own.